the UMP, the French rights, the French Conservative Party. With us to talk about it is Philippe Moreau-Chevrolet of Le Plus, the Nouvel Observateur's interactive website, and Elisabeth Moutet of the Sunday Telegraph, Gregory Viscusi of Bloomberg News, and Chris Bickerton, who teaches at Political Science Institute Sciences Po. And we're pleased to be joined for the beginning of part two here by Media Buzz's one and only James Creedon, and you've had no shortage of work on this one for the past 10 days.
Absolutely, François. It's been a series of dramatic headlines for well over a week now. We had Feuilleton, which is soap opera. We've had Guerre Civile, Civil War, and now it's turned to collective suicide or suicide en direct, live suicide. That's the front page headline of Le Figaro this morning. As you can see there, UMP, suicide en direct. And what's more, you've had headlines, the headlines are kind of moving now more towards Sarkozy. Sarkozy peut-il sauver l'UMP? Can Sarkozy save the UMP party? That's on the afternoon, this afternoon's edition of Le Monde. Exactly the same headline in question form being put to web users at Le Figaro. And their poll at the moment says that 58% do not think, in fact, that Nicolas Sarkozy can save the UMP party. But that leaves 40% who think he can. So it seems the jury is out for now on that one. Sarkozy very much present throughout the news today, as you were saying earlier, François, en tête-à-tête avec Fillon. So meeting Fillon personally for lunch and on the telephone with Jean-François Copé. So clearly present in those negotiations. And as one Fillon loyalist said, and this was picked up by an Express journalist in a tweet, a relaxed atmosphere, confident, reciprocal confidence between the two men.
Right,
so each trying to kind of pick up on Sarkozy's favours and talk about that. Copé was saying something similar.
And let me ask you, James, we've seen a lot of satire over the past week, and I know you're going to show us some now, but has that satire been from all over the political spectrum or within the right? Have the supporters of the right themselves been writing the obituary of their party? It's
been across the board. You have cartoonists, you have people on the right, people on the left. You see even members of the UMP party cutting up their cards and putting them online, photos of that online as well. But here's Plantu's version of things today. You can see that
political cartoonist,
a political cartoonist for Le Monde. If I can pick up on that there, he's showing basically the two protagonists tearing each other apart, and of course the party being the main victim of that. And indeed, Plantu has been using the image of the UMP logo, the tree, in earlier cartoons in this past week, the tree of the UMP party being plucked. That's the actual logo of the UMP party. And here's a look at what other Twitter users have been doing. Tree being cracked right down the middle. Elsewhere, you've got UMP with a sort of exploding
mushroom cloud.
Nuclear bomb. You also have 6 feet under. You've got, that's kind of similar to Plantu's version there with no leaves left, really. What else do you have? And RIP instead of UMP. So people having a lot of fun with the UMP logo and everything that's happening. Copé means to bail out the water. So people here making reference to him, I suppose, sinking in his own ship. Alain Juppé, the man who was meant to save the UMP party, well, we saw how that worked out. Mission impossible, according to one one version of that online. A lot of people also drawing historical analogies, saying that this is a bit like Richelieu or Copéon instead of Napoleon, François II instead of François Hollande. So lots of references to the past and indeed to fiction. Or I suppose westerns there, Killer Jeff. I quite liked this one. This was also on. Somebody managed to get a photo of the evacuation map at the UMP office on Rue de Vaugirard, which I think is pretty apt for the current situation.
It seems a bit complicated to get out.
Right, exactly. Even if you have a map. And perhaps this is the solution. A lot of people putting up photos as well of a blended horror of François Copé,
Jean-François Fillon. Yuck from Elisabeth Moutet there.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks for that, James Creedon. And
thanks,
we'll have, of course, more media buzz later right here on...
Looks like Barak, the Israeli defense minister, just quit politics.
A little bit, yeah. So to get back to the point that was made at the beginning of part one, maybe the politicians don't know how to use the internet, but it looks as though the faithful do. What have you found? Have you found that it's people within the UMP itself that are the most biting when it comes to this?
Yes, and it's a loser takes it all situation. So they can only lose, and the more they communicate this way, the more they lose. But they're still going at it because they are taken in a circle, a little bit like a hamster, you know, in its wheel. They are always feeding the medias with little tweets, and they are coming to the point where they are insulting each other. And one of Copé's affiliates called Fillon directly called him over Twitter a coward, and for instance, and they are the verge on fighting with their bare hands. I think if we gather them in the same room, there should be a fight because they are really insulting. Insults is really something that you rarely see in French politics.
But why? Or explain
Not
it
for 50 years, but you used
And
to.
in essence, began before
It's
the votes were
back in-
counted. So it wasn't just. It's not just that they're so separated. There's a natural fighting over it. Even before they were very
But
hard
wait a
on
minute.
each other.
Yeah.
The
They don't know how to use
hang on a
it.
second.
They don't
Politics
know.
is not for the faint of heart. People do underhanded stuff in every country all the time.
Yeah, but you don't.
Why are they so
you don't insult
public about their
people in
acrimony?
public. You don't insult each other in public. You do it in a private place.
But
where
does it
there are
reflect
no
more on
cameras.
the ones
They are taken by it. They don't think anymore. They just
they're consumed by it?
Yeah, they are fascinated by it. They see their picture on the medias, and they want to have. Everybody wants to have his own piece.
Well, I think the party never really drew the lessons of why it lost to Sarkozy,
No.
and the party's still very divided about why they lost. Did they go too far to the right? Did they not go to the right early enough? I mean, there's all sorts of very much like what the Republicans are going to go through in the U.S. over the next year.
I was going to ask:
But-
are the
Absolutely.
Republicans doing a mea culpa? Are they analyzing their defeat in a better manner?
Oh, yes.
It's a little early to say.
Oh,
I mean,
no, I mean,
Mitt Romney
post-mortem
certainly
in it.
hasn't learned the lessons. If after his comments about the Obama buying the election and stuff, but the way that Mitt Romney was so quickly shot down
Yes.
by so many leaders within the Republican Party, I think it's pretty clear that the Republicans do realize that just with all the demographic changes they're facing in America, they've got to shape up.
And they've been hacking the campaign to pieces. They've been post-morteming
But
everything.
They
I
did,
mean, it's-
they did a good job with the medias this time. The Republicans, they knew how to use the social medias. In France, we don't know how to use this
Yeah,
new
but-
system, media
and
system.
also-
But before you give the Republicans
François
too much-
Hollande and the UMP have the same problem.
Before you give the
like this.
Republicans too much
Medias.
credit, I mean the old guard like Karl Rove are going to stay in there fighting and not
well,
and
he
not
is
admit that
not popular.
But is
I know,
one of the
but-
differences, of course, the fact that in the United States, the Republicans still control the House of Representatives. In France, the
Nothing.
socialists control even
Everything.
the Senate, which they never had
they
before.
control the Senate, they control all the regions, they control every lever of government.
But
The UMP doesn't
we're
have
talking
anything
about
left.
the new media, but what fascinates me is how this has revolutionized the old media, and by old media I mean Le Figaro. Le Figaro was this incredibly servile, incredibly kowtowing newspaper that supported most right-wing government in the country, and it had this sort of Prakti Pravda-esque tone to it. And suddenly they had all these wonderful stories reporting on what was going on at the UMP.
So you're surprised when you see suicide at the UMP on its front
Exactly,
cover.
Yeah,
and
it's
the
very
readers
surprising.
apparently have been
It's
reacting
surprising.
very strongly, sending letters to the editor saying this is marvelous, more of it, the truth at last. And so what might come out of all this
That's
is
the
that
collapse of the
Le Figaro might
UMP
be a
wall.
new.
That's the collapse of the wall.
Well, the Figaro changed its editor-in-chief, though. right
Well,
after the
yes,
election.
but I think it's a combination of the situation, which was their constituency, their readers, and what they
get
cover
back
most.
to a point. I want to get back to a point that Greg made in part one, which was the UMP's birth. We're talking about its perhaps death. Let's talk about its birth. It was born of a previous divorce in 1976. The then Prime Minister Jacques Chirac stormed out of the government, taking the Gaullist brand name with him, leaving centrist Valéry Giscard d'Estaing basically to fall on his own sword, which he did at the next presidential election. And Chris Bickerton, a decade ago, as Greg was mentioning, they were able to get those two disparate trends within the right, the centrists on the one hand, the Gaullists on the other, together under one big tent.
I think we shouldn't underestimate the capacity of Nicolas Sarkozy to bring different individuals within his party together. The great difference, I think, between Sarkozy and Royal at the time of the election campaign that Sarkozy in the end won was that Royal seemed...
Ségolène Royal, the head of the Socialists.
Well, she seemed to think that she could win the election without the Socialist Party, and she did not bring the different big names of the Socialist Party under her banner, and essentially set up her own proto-political party called Désir d'Avenir, and thought she could win the campaign that way. Sarkozy never thought that he would win the presidency on his own, and so he brought all these different figures within his overall banner. Now, that's the capacity of him as an individual to bring people together, the force of his personality, his determination, and his energy. I mean, these are qualities of political individuals. I think in this case, there's nobody who quite has that awareness, that ability to bring people together, and there is a new set of circumstances.
But beyond the personalities, is there this long-standing ideological difference between those who see themselves as the heirs of de Gaulle and those who see themselves as centrists, or I guess in Britain, I guess they would be what?
It's hard to say that because Copé's gone so far to the right that I would not call him a Gaullist by any means.
No, I think there's a phenomenon which is a particular one, which is that the French right at the moment is definitely pulled between a deep-seated conservatism, which I think most of its representatives share.
Not to mention the electorate. Their electorate,
which a chunk of the electorate share, and which they think they can win campaigns on.
Has gone to
but
the
there was a difference at the time between, on the one hand, those who were for sort of a Gaullist view of the economy, which was the state has a hand in helping these big champions of industry and all of that, and those who were more free marketeers. Today, the conversation is a different one, it seems.
Well, here we see that there are some issues, for example, whether it's on liberalising the French economy, pushing it towards the market in all respects, whether it's on, I guess, socially divisive issues. We've seen gay marriage being a big issue at the moment that's dividing France. But some issues, such as religion, for example, and immigration, are having the French right being pulled in lots of different directions. So there is a more liberal-orientated part of the French right, which is willing to open up on some issues, but still has a strong conservative core. And then there's a much more, I would say, opportunistic part of the French right. All it wants to do is to win votes. Copé, I think, is the arch exponent of that, has no scruples to use the language of the far right.
Raises another question, which is, do political parties have a future? Political parties as we know it, as we know them, political parties thinking about issues, or are they turning into electoral voting machines? And maybe that's a big question between the UMP's fate, actually.
Well, and Elisabeth Moutet, let's look at the issues here. Let's look at the issues. There are two of them in which l'UMP is often divided. One is Europe, and the other is immigration.
Well, that's interesting, especially when it comes to Europe. And you talked about liberalising the economy. That's also one of those issues. And it is one in which both main parties are actually split. Because if you listen to what part of the socialist ministers, I mean, including Arnaud Montebourg, the Minister for Productive Competitivity.
Just call him industry minister.
Yes, it's much better. Redressement productif. And that is completely sort of, forced state intervention in a very statist way, which is, you have partisan for this on the Gaullist side, you've got partisan for this on the left. On Europe, same thing. Socialist Party and the UMP were split between people who, for instance, voted no to the European Constitution. The current Minister for European Affairs, socialist Bernard Cazeneuve, voted no for it. So did the current Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius. And in the right-wing party, you had people who were against Europe, and you've got pro-Europeans. So, and immigration, it's a bit different. It's because it's become.
François Fillon clearly saying that was his red line, and that's what differentiated him from
Copé. But here it's a bit different. First of all, because on the left there's more homogeneity on this one, so it's really something that divides. It divides within the right. It divides them from the National Front, but it also divides them from what they see as the illusion of political correctness. So it's. I think they're more. They all realise that there's a way you have to look at this, and there's a way you have to treat it, and it's more the means that they disagree on, that the fact that there's a problem.
And of course, relishing the moment is the leader of the far right, Marine Le Pen.
C'est un cadeau.
Seeing is that the UMP no longer exists. The party's finished. What I'd say to UMP supporters is it's over. Whatever the outcome of this, the one who will head the party will have no legitimacy whatsoever. Mr. Copé doesn't understand this.
Manna from heaven for the far right?
Absolutely. We've seen that the Front National has been rising in the polls. Every election, it's getting bigger at every election. And it's now we have a huge economic crisis, which is pushing it even more. And we see in the polls that all the popular votes are going to Marine Le Pen now, massively going to it. So if you plug on that, the fact that the traditional right is falling apart, and the Socialist Party is not fulfilling the wishes of this popular vote, we can say that we are heading to a situation which will be very, very complicated, very difficult political situation.
Gregory Vescouzzi, in France, next presidential election is a long time away. It's in 4 years. In Italy, there's a general election coming up, and within the right, there seems to be a discussion over whether you go for the Europhile centrist policies or you go for the more populist touch.
Well, the Italian right has completely atomized. I mean, before the French right did because of Berlusconi, leaving, saying he was coming back, realizing that he didn't have any support to come back, leaving again, and now just within the past 48 hours saying he wants to come back again, but to a party that's almost irrelevant because they've dropped to about 15% in the polls. The League has had its crisis, has had scandals, so the League has plummeted in the polls. So as you say, there's a movement led by Montezemolo and some centrist politicians to come up with a party that will support Mario Monti, who's not a politician, the prime minister, who therefore will not present himself for any party, but they are running specifically saying that they will try to have a Monti due, a second Monti government come in. So the Italian right is completely atomized, but then it never had one major party the way that the French right did. I mean, the French right had the UMP. Italy was always a series of separate parties. So they never really, Italy's always had coalition governments. They don't really have the tradition.
And Elisabeth was saying, as she was saying about how in France, the far-right discourse seeping slowly into the mainstream. Is it the same thing in Italy, would you say?
No, because there's not been a swing to the far right's not really picked up a lot of votes. The protest votes have gone to Beppe Grillo, who's a comic, who's very, very hard to his five-star movement is very, very hard to say if it's right or left. I mean, it's got elements of both.
Right, still a bit of novelty.
Sort of, yeah. It's a protest vote, but it's very hard to say right or left. I would not say there's been a swing to the right in Italy.
A final word on this from Chris Bickerton.
I think there's a specific part of there's something specific to France. In France, a big chunk of the electorate for a long time voted on the extreme left. The decline and eventual collapse of the French Communist Party translated itself almost directly into the emergence of an extreme right. Now that's profoundly changed French politics, and today the question is how far right it will go, because there's no left that's going to really, in a muscled way, check this drift towards the right in France. And for me, at least, that's the most worrying thing about what's happening at the moment.
The Socialist Party is ambiguous. When we listen to Manuel Valls, he has some very ambiguous words about immigration.
Yeah. Philippe Moreau-Chevrolet, I want to thank you. I want to thank Gregory Vescouzzi, Chris Bickerton. I also want to thank Anne-Elisabeth Moutet. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.